Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are. Thank you for joining us today for the Understanding iPaaS for System Migration webinar. My name is Rod O'Connor. I'm Jack of all trades here at E1 Solutions, and I will be walking through today's presentation. So let's jump right in. For our agenda today, we'll be discussing, first of all, a few terms we'll be using. As we move through the rest of the webinar, just, understanding some terms related to understanding data migration. We're going to talk about our overall migration strategy here at E1 Solutions when you're converting from a system to a system. Now, quick note, the examples I'll be using today will talk a lot about moving from, a system like GP or NAV or SL, and they will move you specifically to systems like, to Business Central in our example. However, all of the concepts we're applying throughout this really apply to converting from any system to any system. So if you're moving from Salesforce to Microsoft CRM or Microsoft CRM back to Salesforce, or if you're moving from, any system to Acumatica or NetSuite or F&O, all of these concepts will apply to those data conversion exercises. So basically, anytime you're implementing a new business application, everything I'm about to talk about is going to apply, and even E1's part within that will still apply as well. Okay, we're going to talk about connecting to, moving, and accessing historical data, master data, and open transactions. We're actually going to be which are actually going to be the first three terms we're going to be defining in just a moment. So hopefully that covers exactly what you were hoping to get out of today's session. We do have the chat and questions windows open. So if you have questions or chats, feel free to throw them in there. I will do my best to watch both of my monitors and make sure that I'm answering your questions in a timely fashion. When we get into terms to be used, actually, two terms that I didn't even think of, as we move through putting in here, terms you may not be familiar with, well, three technically, iPaaS. So iPaaS itself stands for Integration Platform as a Service. And basically what that means is it's an integration platform that you subscribe to. Basically, everything in the past few years has become as a service. Integration platforms are no different. Now, E1's iPaaS offering really comes in two parts. We have our traditional integration product called Smart Connect. And when I talk traditional, I talk more about moving data from one place to another place. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And then the other product in our iPaaS offering is PopDoc. Now, PopDoc gives you the virtual integration aspect. And what that means is I can actually embed PopDoc functionality and the data within it into other applications. For example, I can embed a widget into Business Central, and now I can expose data in Business Central and give users access to that data as if it was in Business Central, but not have to physically import that data to Business Central. So that'll become a little bit more important when we start talking historical data downstream. Now, three of the terms that will come up a lot, and these again apply to any system that you look at, are master data, open transactions, and historical data. So master data is always going to be the data that you use to control a transaction. So think customers, think items, think vendors, think currencies, think payment terms, think bank accounts. All of these are things you set up once and maintain sometimes so that you can then use those things on transactions downstream. Okay, so master data, again, customers, vendors, items are the big three, and then anything else that goes into creating those ties into that as well. Open transactions, it seems, seems fairly self-explanatory, but it does bear repeating. Open transactions are any receivables, payables, any transaction in the system that's not been fully closed, right? So I issue an invoice, maybe I've received 50% payment on it. That other 50% that's not paid yet, that's an open transaction. Okay, and open transactions will always have to be moved into a new system because that's your starting point, right? You have to be able to receive cash against those, stuff like that. So again, think OpenAR, OpenAP, think on-hand inventory, uncleared uh, if uncleared payments from your bank account if you're making paper checks and those haven't cleared your account yet. Um, beginning balances and inventory, serial numbers, lot numbers, the whole gamut, right? So open transactions or opening balances is a big thing in there. Now, one thing we won't talk about too much today is actually, you know what? I'm going to circle back to that because it'll be less confusing downstream. Finally is historical data. Historical data is any fully closed transaction in the system. So fully paid invoices, fully paid purchase orders, fully received purchase orders, fully paid payable vouchers, all of those things. The reason we break those out separate from open transactions is in a lot of system conversions, it's really expensive or sometimes even not technologically feasible to bring that historical data into a new system. When you're implementing a new application, hopefully you're taking that opportunity to rejig your business processes, rejig how you're processing them through the new system, and it's rare that you can get that historical data, which is, I hate this analogy, but I'll use it anyway, your square data from your old system and plunk it into the round hole of your new system. If it's even possible, it's very often way beyond the cost that makes it worthwhile to have imported that. So we're going to show you an option for that today that we feel is very compelling. Okay, some other things you'll hear about today, data lakes. Now a data lake is basically inexpensive cloud storage. There's three major providers that we work with. The first is Microsoft's Azure data lakes. We also work with Amazon's AWS data lakes, and we also work with one called Wasabi, which is another data lake provider outside of those other big two. They are very cost effective. Like I mentioned earlier, we do see most people being able to store all of their historical data for, $20 or less per month, depending, what features you've chosen within your data lake configuration, stuff like that. Another thing we're going to probably mention, we won't dig too much into it, but because we're talking about BC, we'll probably touch on the cloud migration tool for BC. Basically what that is Microsoft has provided you a tool that grabs data from at least GP. I believe they have one for SL as well, but it grabs certain parts of those systems and moves it into a data lake ostensibly so you can build reports on that. It does have limitations. You can see here that it doesn't move any of your ISV solutions without you writing a bunch of code to make that happen. And when the data gets out there to that data lake that they've built, it has all the old SQL names. So anybody who's worked with GP for any length of time knows that that database has some obscure table names, we'll call them. So SOP 10200 doesn't really tell you what's in there. So you do have all of those limitations of having SQL table and column names. Now, when that data gets over there, another thing we'll talk about is the PopDoc data lake upload tool. Now, what the PopDoc data lake upload tool does is get you to a point where, it allows you to upload to either Azure or AWS at this point. I believe Wasabi is coming, but it allows you to grab that data and move it to those data lakes in a way that can be consumed within PopDoc, so that now you're getting plain English column names, table names. It works with Nav, SL, and SQL Server, as well as GP, obviously, which will be the example we'll kind of walk through today. Okay, another cool thing here is you can actually choose individual lists from each of those connectors. So I could choose from GP, for example, individual smart lists to upload, or I could upload the entire database if I wanted to take that old SQL Server offline and then um, and then basically have all of my data out there in my Azure Data Lake. Okay, now when it comes to our overall migration strategy, I mentioned, 3 types of data and 2 applications right at the top of this presentation. So when we talk about master records and open transactions, those are actually going to be Smart Connect work, right? Because both of those types of data have to physically move from my old system into my new system. Okay. And then I've got historical data, which, as I mentioned earlier, generally doesn't make the actual transition into my new system physically. So generally what I'm going to have to do with that is figure out another way to report on it. Okay. And again, we'll show you a couple of options there. So if we want to talk about master data first, I like this one because it shows you some of the cooler features of Smart Connect that maybe we haven't mentioned as much, as well as a new feature of PopDoc that we don't show in a lot of demos. Okay, so the concept with master data here is we want to get that data out to Excel. So again, I'm going to use customers as my example, but think any master data from within your system. You're going to have users clean the data within that Excel, right? You're going to add in those new fields. Going from GP to BC, in GP we had the customer class. In Business Central, that gets blown out to customer posting group and general business posting group. So basically, you want to give them the fields to figure out where's that data going to go. And then we're going to use the Excel add-in and Smart Connect to send the data into whatever that target system is. Again, Business Central in my example. Some of the benefits of this, it does empower your users. So again, using Business Central as my specific example, the out-of-the-box method that Microsoft proposes is called a configuration package. So basically what that is you export a specific template from Business Central that has all the columns and such that you need. You plunk your data into that particular format, and then you import that into Business Central through the configuration packages. Okay, now a couple of drawbacks to the configuration packages. The structure is very set. You have to fit your data into their structure. Second, getting access to where configuration packages get executed is very often a function of either IT or the partner who's doing the implementation. Something like that is generally not the person who's actually maintaining that data or correcting that data. So you've got this kind of back and forth. The configuration packages do run much slower than a Smart Connect integration. We've had a couple partners come back to us and indicate it's around 70%, 75% faster to run a Smart Connect integration than a configuration package. And you're getting immediate feedback from Smart Connect as opposed to having to go and find that feedback from a configuration package. So what happens here is I can have my end users within Excel execute this file and understand whether or not their data went in cleanly right away. Okay, so let's take a quick look at how I might go about this process. So I'm going to start out using PopDoc as my data source for anyone on the call who's maybe a SQL user, or if you've been using GP for a while, you probably know how to build refreshable workbooks directly from SQL, stuff like that. Maybe I've got a smart list already set up that I just want to export out to Excel. All of those are viable options. But I'm here to talk about E1's iPaaS. So I'm going to show you a little bit about PopDoc while I'm here. So I have set up a PopDoc favorite called my conversion sample customer master. Okay, now I want to get this data out to Excel. I do have a couple choices. I can export it directly from here, right? To say directly to Excel. Or if I was already outside of Excel, I might want to use the add-in for PopDoc. So I come to my data tab and I've got this PopDoc data insert here where I can come in. And I've already logged into this as myself, but it would normally ask me to log in. I'm going to choose my GP connector. So in my case, it's my demo connector. I'm going to choose the list that I'm looking for, right? So in my case, it happens to be under sales. It happens to be customers. And I have set up a favorite called conversion sample, just to make it easy on myself. And I can click on insert data, and it's going to take that favorite and pop it in to my window. Now, I've already done this. If we were a cooking show, I'd be pulling a pie out of my oven right now. And so I've already dropped that data into this tab here earlier today. Now I've got this data, and this is where my data, or my customers, my end users, are going to start to cleanse that. So they're going to fix, all the cases where, Canada has been spelled 7 different ways, or USA has been represented as US, USA, U period dot U.S. A. United States, all the different ways that USA gets listed in here. So they're basically going to scrub out this data, make sure it works. They're going to delete customers that they don't want to import into the new system, because why would you import a bunch of garbage? And they're going to do things like add a column here for posting group, and they're going to, fill that in and do all the stuff that end users do. Okay, so once all of that is done, you know, your users have the ability to go to this E1 Solutions tab. Now, before you gave them this file, you would have clicked on Service Settings, where you would have selected a Smart Connect process. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. Okay, you're going to enter your password and validate it. Okay, and that's where, and then we're going to choose whatever our process is, right? So I'll just do this one for now. And basically, G1A1, basically now my users, when I'm done actually processing this data, are simply going to click on Run Map, at which point this data will get pushed to Business Central in my example, but in your case, it could be, again, Acumatica, NetSuite, F&O, insert accounting system here, insert CRM system here, wherever you're pushing this master data. So again, we've empowered the users right away. They're getting their immediate feedback. There's none of this back and forth with the consultants. Overall, everybody has a happier feeling, and it's much faster. So that's our master data plan. Let me jump back into the PowerPoint here, as much as I don't like to be in PowerPoints. So next we would talk about open transactional data. Okay, and again, this is all of my uncleared payables, uncleared receivables are the big two. Back in the day, we used to ask everybody to write all of the paper checks for all of the outstanding APs, so we didn't have to convert any of it, and then they would just manage the distribution of those checks based on, the paper files in their desk. We don't really do that anymore because, well, electronic payments, but so now we have to actually convert that data. So when we're talking about open transaction or beginning balance data, we really want to do a point-to-point integration. And again, this is a Smart Connect function. So Smart Connect has connectors for SQL Server, which is where all of the on-premise ERPs tend to live these days. If you happen to be connecting to something that Smart Connect can't connect directly to, maybe a QuickBooks Online, for example, we do have connectors in PopDoc, and PopDoc could become your data source for this as well. And in fact, PopDoc might be your data source choice anyway, just given its filtering capabilities. And, if you don't want to build a SQL statement to do all of that. But basically what we're going to do is build this integration fairly early in our implementation project, try and get this set up as early as we can. And we're going to actually run this a number of times. We're going to try to make sure that all of this data flows correctly. We're going to have our end users do a validation that it did flow correctly, just so that on day one, or day 0, or, sometimes it's day 5, depends when you want to do it. At your official cutover, you just execute these processes, rerun your validation that beginning in the new system matches ending in the old, and then you're done. You're officially cut over. I don't usually do an example of this just because it's literally any other Smart Connect demo that you want to see, and I'm happy to send that to anyone on the call if you need to see a recording of that. Okay, so now we get into our historical data. Okay, so we have a few different points here. So I'm going to show you inside of Business Central a couple of examples of history only, combined history, and then what you can do with those. So I'm going to jump into Business Central. So I'm going to start off with what we call our main widget. I'm sorry, my BC is taking a moment to get itself set up here. Let's make that a little bigger on your screen. So I'm going to go to our PopDoc main widget. Now, for those who haven't seen a PopDoc demo, our main widget here is, it does get set up when you first buy PopDoc. It gets set up with about 60 lists out of the box, which are reading Business Central data, but that's not why we're here today. I want to actually click on this menu and take a look at these guys. This widget is where we can also embed data from other systems. In my case, you can see I've got some migration samples for GP, some migration samples for Nav, SL, NetSuite. Again, any system to any system, that's what I could show you on this thing. Now, looking at the GP, just to kind of carry on that example for what we've been doing, I do have this example where I can pull all of my sales lines from both GP and Business Central. So first of all, I could get all of my sales lines from Business Central. That's just a given, right? I told you that I'm pulling about 60 lists out of Business Central when I first install PopDoc. One of those is my sales transactions. But I can also be showing on here just data from GP. This account transactions is only reading GP data. This particular example here is reading data from both Business Central and is merging it together with Dynamics GP data. Okay, so you can see I've got some GP transactions here based on this, and if I resort it, I've got Business Central transactions at the other end of that data. Okay, now the cool thing about this is now that it's blended together, I can do some neat things like, maybe add, well, they haven't given me a customer number field for some reason, but I can group by item number, for example, and I can see a summary of life-to-date information about this particular item based on my all sales line items blended together. Now, the important note about this is these lines here that say Business Central do exist inside Business Central, but these ones don't. These actually live in an Azure SQL, an Azure data lake out there, and they're being read in real time and blended with Business Central data also in real time. Okay, now I could show you all the different features of PopDoc, like favorites and filters and all of that stuff. But again, that would be a separate demo from what we're covering today. But just know that this is a fully interactive list where you can give your users all the information. And it doesn't have to be just sales. We all tend to focus on sales when we do stuff like this. I actually came up in more of a distribution background. I dealt in nutraceuticals, which means we had to worry a lot about lot tracking. And so anytime where I've converted from one system to another, that break in lot tracking can be a real problem if I have to go through a recall, because now I have to sit down and figure it out, quite often on paper, where did all of this information come from at a minimum in Excel. But by blending it through PopDoc like this, I could have one list that is still giving me that lot tracking information life to date, which is pretty cool. All right, I'm going to show you another spot where we can take a look at this. I'm going to go to my customers here, and I'm going to pull up a GP staple. Aaron Fitz. Okay, so here's my Aaron Fitz 001, and what I want to point out is Skippy skipping down here in the middle of the screen. Now, what he's doing is he's again pulling together data from Dynamics GP, which is my historical data, and blending it with BC data. Oh, we're limited here to 100. blending it here with Business Central and GP data so that I'm actually seeing life to date, not just for, wow, we're doing really well with Aaron Fitz these days. Not just what we did historically, not just what we've done in BC, but life to date information. Again, go back to my lot and serial tracking example from earlier. I could have a grid like this on my item card. I could have a grid like this on a sales transaction. These widgets can be embedded on any page within Business Central. If this were a Salesforce to CE example, again, I could be embedding this data anywhere within CE to see all of that life to date data brought together. So hopefully you're seeing some really cool capabilities here, some possibilities on your part. All right, let's jump back into our PowerPoint. Okay, so I already did that demo. Now connecting to the demo, or connecting to the data. Now when it's on premise, one of the problems people have with exposing data to a tool like Smart Connect, for example, is they don't really want to poke a hole in their firewall to allow us access to the data that's on premise. So that's where we actually came up with the data lake upload tool. Okay, so basically what that allows us to do is we install this on your network. It's able to read the data directly from the SQL Server, package it up into the requirements for the data lake that you're sending that to, and actually physically push that data up to the data lake. Okay, so that's what this is talking about here. Um, it Our data lake upload tool will also let you know if there's any problems with the data. We don't run into too many problems. Mostly it's if you have multiple company databases and the structure of the data isn't exactly the same from one database to another. One common example in the GP space actually is if you happen to be running Extender, a lot of times you'll have created an Extender object in one of your GP company databases, but you haven't added that to all of your company databases. So we would require you to add that to all so that we could get that data uploaded. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the screens that are the data lake upload tool for GP. Just know that, well, let's go to this next screen so I can show you. So the screens I'm going to show you are related to copying smart lists up to the data lake. However, you can see that it's the same for SL, similar for Nav, and similar for SQL Server. Okay, now I talked to you earlier about two different strategies. One is to copy, in the case of GP, smart lists up, which would really become what I call your day-to-day lists. Those are the ones that you're going to be showing through widgets in Business Central. Those are the ones that you're going to be, combining with other solutions or with other data as you go forward. They're really just the ones you look at regularly, as opposed to the Dynamics GP copy tables views, which is a full database backup. Now that's what we call your insurance policy, right? So if I'm going to be decommissioning that SQL Server, or even if I'm not, and I just want to have one offsite hosted in Azure backup of that data, I can do that using the copy tables and views. What we see most customers do is have two different data lake containers. One will be for the active or day-to-day data, and one will be for the just-in-case data. And we don't access this one very often. We access this one hopefully every day. Okay. In the case of Nav, they don't have an equivalent to smart lists or quick queries. So in the case of Nav, you're just getting the full tables and views that are being uploaded. And then obviously SQL Server, we break out between tables and views. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is log into PopDoc. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we're going to connect to the data lake that you set up. Now, as I mentioned, I mentioned there's two different containers within that data lake we may want to write to. So we would normally run this process twice, once for the smart list, once for the full database backup. In this case, we're doing the smart list. Okay. The next thing we have to do is connect to your GP or NAV or SL environment or SQL Server. In the case of GP and NAV and SL, we do support a lot of versions. So you can see up here, we've selected a GP 18.0 version, but we go all the way back. In the case of GP, I believe we're going all the way back to version 9. If you still have a GP that's older than that, let us know. In the case of NAV, I forget how far back we're going. I think it's 5 or so that we're going back. So yeah, we're going to enter our credentials. Now, just so you know, if you are running this and you happen to not see your specific release, just choose the closest one. There are a couple of hot fixes that we didn't take into account, stuff like that. So just choose the closest release to what you have and you'll be good. The next thing we have to do is choose which companies we'd like to upload to the data lake. So you're not going to upload test companies or development companies or anything that you have that's a non-production company, because you're not storing data for the sake of storing data. You just want to have your production company data up there and ready to go. And then last but not least, you're going to choose which, in this case, Smart Connect lists, or in the case of SL, quick queries, whatever it is that you're trying to upload. You're going to pull it from here and upload it. After that, we run it, and then running it will tell us, what's going on here. You can see I've got 156 lists that I'm going to be uploading in total. I've completed 4 within this progress, and it'll count its way up and let you know as you go. And then finally, you'll get a report. Now you can see in this one, I've got a bunch of skipped. Again, we're not creating data for the sake of creating data. So if there's no data on the list that you've asked us to upload, we just won't upload it. It doesn't make sense to put an empty file up there just to confuse Azure. These failed, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of different reasons they would fail, but it's primarily about, what do you have by way of what do you have by way of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Oh, structure of the tables. So if I have 2 smart lists that don't have the same structure and I try to push them up together, that's not going to work. So we'll have to make sure the structures match and then rerun the process just for those lists. And that's it. That's our entire data lake upload tool. It doesn't take very long to run. You're seeing terabytes go up in a very small amount of time, maybe an hour or so. So we're getting that data compressed and getting it up there. Now, this was for on-premise data that we've been walking through. We do have another methodology if you're coming from something that was in the cloud. So within PopDoc itself, if you were, for example, coming from NetSuite to Business Central, we do have a very similar feature, but it's built into PopDoc and allows you to pull that data from cloud to cloud. You don't need a data lake upload tool for that, simply because that data doesn't live inside your network. You're not looking to poke a hole in a firewall to get access to that data. You're simply setting up a connection, and we have the tools in PopDoc to push the data from that old system up to a data lake. Okay, so to recap on the historical data, basically allows you to securely connect to any of your on-premise data, anything that's SQL-based, NetSuite, sorry, not NetSuite, NAV is what I meant to say, GP or SL. We do have full instructions on our website as well for everything I just showed you. I know I just kind of gave you a quick recap, but if you go to our website, popdoc.com, go to our knowledge base and search for data lake upload, you're going to find a link to detailed instructions from soup all the way to nuts on how to get your data up to the data lake. You'll also find in there information on how to create those widgets that I showed you, how to get them embedded inside of Business Central. I'm taking a look at the queue. I don't see a whole lot in the queue by way of questions. This would be a good time to throw some in if you have them, because I am officially at the end of my slides after 35 minutes. All right, well, in the meantime, Again, my name is Rod O'Connor. I'm a jack of all trades here at E1 Solutions. If you do think of questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to either myself or your account manager here at E1 Solutions. If you're not sure who that is, just send an email to sales@e1solutions.com. We'll make sure that we get you hooked up with the right person to get you the answers to all of those questions. And with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining me today, and hopefully we'll see you soon.